Hey everybody, it's Lisa Colon Delay, and today I wanted to bring you a little bit about Abba Moses. He's the guy who I hope we can learn more about in the upcoming book I have. It's coming out next year, and I know that date, I know it now, it's January 27th of next year. And what I want to do is, just before Lent next year, I want to introduce us to a few of the desert mothers and fathers who will guide us through Lent in their own unique way with their own unique wisdom. And there aren't too many of these people that we actually know today in the West. In Coptic Christianity, Coptic Orthodox Christianity, and some Eastern Orthodox Christianity, some of these people are regularly celebrated and well known, but not so much to us, and their wisdom is fantastic for us today. So I wanted to bring you something from the book about Abba Moses. And this Abba is one of my favorites. He comes from a really horrible background and a really tough situation. And his transformation is completely incredible. It's awing and inspiring. He becomes such a gentle, nonviolent, humble man who is just adored by all his students. And I wanted to bring you a little something from the book about him. And the community where he lived, although it was raided and he passed away back in the early 400s, that community went back eventually and it continues today. There are several hundred monastics in the area of desert, and that would be kind of near Alexandria, Egypt, in the West Nile Delta region. And it's amazing. All these years later, there are still desert hermits and desert monastics out there, just like Abba Moses and the many others. So I wanted to read to you from the book today about anger. And anger is one of the afflicting thoughts. You're going to learn about an afflicting thought in each chapter, and they're sort of similar to, you may have heard of the 7 deadly sins. They're not the 7 deadly sins, but some of them overlap, and they're considered afflicting thoughts because they're temptations that come to all of us, no matter what, some more than others, but they're not considered just moral failings where we need to feel bad about them and do penance and feel terrible. What Evagrius, the desert hermit Evagrius, taught his students was to use the knowledge of these afflicting thoughts as preventative medicine, so you could see what was coming to you. You could know, oh man, this is what I feel like when I have this afflicting thought. Now I'm prepared to sort of battle them off and fend them off and go another day toward peace deep down in my soul, and be able to repent if something happens where I give in to some sort of temptation. So the first one would come to people in the desert would be usually related to food, because you'd have to leave all your menu behind and eat very simply when you were out in the desert. There wasn't much there, and they were also eating simply on purpose. And usually the next one that would bother people would be lust or fornication. You had to, if you were going to be a desert monastic at the time, you had to do a vow of chastity. And that meant no sexual activity or sexual pleasure, and turning all that energy to devotion to God. So that would plague people, as you can imagine. And also would plague people would be anger. Not just this initial anger that we all have that's normal to human response. That's normal. The anger that happens that's stored, and usually we can call that wrath. It's kind of, we can have an initial anger response, like similar to a response of pain. And then sometimes we decide what we're going to do later, like revenge, or we're going to be bitter, or we're going to not forgive, or something like that. And that comes later after the initial anger response. Abba Moses struggled so much with anger. He had a lot of reasons to be deeply wounded, and he did a lot of reprehensible things before he turned his life around. Anger was a huge, huge problem for him. So he's the wise elder guiding us through this afflicting thought. I wanted to read something to you from this section in the book called Stored Anger. Stored Anger Spoils is the heading. So let me read that to you now. Let me put on my spectacles. And it says, Stored anger spoils. Anger, when it is stuffed down, can turn into unconscious self-disgust or insecurity, and even hopelessness, self-despising, and despair. Never forget that once anger is stored, its shelf life is terrible. It soon rots into a reeking social and spiritual poison, wrath. Now it possesses destructive qualities. Rage is an example of unexamined stores of anger that become explosive and create destruction. Bitterness, resentment, envy, spite, indignation, irascibility are all byproducts of stored anger too. All are the putrefied outcome of lingering, unresolved, and undealt with anger. Rage breaks the dam that had been holding back the coming wreckage of wrath. It's wrath that may cause us to truly misperceive and thereby create damage that cannot be undone. There is no counting the many acts of violence or destructive words that have come through the vice of wrath, the stored anger we have let control us. It is grace that subdues anger through self-control. It is the ministry of the Spirit as we cooperate and yield with the work of God. The fruit of the Spirit becomes mature as this temptation of wrath is thwarted over time through diligence. The fruit of the Spirit always begins with love and encompass joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I'll pause here to say that sometimes we're going to hear the opposite. We're going to hear that something crazy like empathy is a sin. It's like saying love is a sin. It's like saying goodness is a sin. That is essentially blasphemy, because the unpardonable sin to say that, because the Spirit works through goodness and things like empathy and things like peace, joy, patience, and love. To say that empathy is a sin is to say that God is not using empathy for God's work, transformation, and glory. And I wouldn't call that upon anybody. You have to be very careful what you say when you say that something good is something bad. That will come and get you. That will come and get you. You might not be shown empathy when you need it most. And I'll close with a quote from Abba Moses, and he is helping his students, the people he lives with, he lives on alongside in community, and he gives them wise words for living together, because they do come to him as a spiritual father and they say, "Father, give me a word that I might live." And that's what spiritual seekers would do back in the day. They wouldn't go very long without getting guidance from their spiritual mother or father. And many people, thousands and thousands of people, went to Abba Moses the Strong from Ethiopia, born in Ethiopia, and they would say, "Father, please give me a word." So this is a quote from him. He says, "Bear your own faults and do not pay attention to anyone else, wondering whether they are good or bad. Do no harm to anyone. Do not think anything bad in your heart towards anyone. Do not scorn the person who does evil. Do not put confidence in the person who does wrong to their neighbor. Do not rejoice with the person who injures their neighbor. Do not rail against anyone, but rather say, 'God knows each one.'" By Abba Moses saying, "God knows each one," that's where we say we don't actually know about a person 100%. God knows what we don't know. We can't make up our judgments and feel anger and bitterness towards a person. Though their works and their actions might lead us to believe something specific, we should reserve that judgment and that decision, that ultimate decision to God. It doesn't help us to keep those thoughts rolling around, and those decisions are not ours to make. Just let them go. And that is how we can have harmony in communities. We mind our business. Let our energies go toward intimacy and devotion to God, not worrying about our neighbor and not feeling ill towards our neighbor. So I'm so excited to bring you more from Abba Moses, and there's so many more. There's also spiritual mothers, which most of us have never even known existed. I certainly did not. And although their sayings were not as well preserved, they still remain, and their stories and legacies still remain, and they can teach us. I'm just thrilled to be able to bring that to you. So I hope you enjoy your day, and I hope you enjoyed this little mini lesson on a desert elder from the past. Bye.